I would like to reconvene this meeting and call the meeting to order for the City Council meeting of January 21st, 2020. Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Councilmember Cordero? Here. Councilmember Moats? Here. Councilmember Soto?
Here.
Councilmember Waterfield?
Here.
And Mayor Patino?
Here. City Attorney, Mr. Watson, could you please give a report on the closed session?
Yes, Madam Mayor. With respect to the two items on the closed session agenda as read by the clerk, both were conferences with counsel regarding litigation that's existing, and instructions were provided. No further report.
Thank you. Our first order of business this evening is a proclamation, and Councilmember Waterfield will be making the presentation.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I am just so honored to make this presentation because this is something that I truly believe in, the sanctity of life, and I just jot down a few words in regards to this. And in lieu of Martin Luther King Day, that was yesterday, I thought this was very appropriate. When Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. spoke those timeless words, "I have a dream," from the steps of Lincoln Memorial in 1963, he inspired generations to fight for equal rights for every human being. Just 10 short years later, the U.S. Supreme Court issued another devastating setback to that dream when it forced states to legalize abortion on demand through Roe v. Wade. Since 1973, more than 61 million unborn babies have been killed by abortions in America. I am often reminded of King's quote, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." The injustice of babies being slaughtered in the womb has led to a number of other threats to innocent human life, chief among them, euthanasia and assisted suicide. If we cannot protect a vulnerable child, how can a frail, elderly grandmother expect protection? If we cannot acknowledge the dignity and inestimable worth of a preborn baby, how can we expect anyone's life to be afforded the respect he or she deserves? Thankfully, pro-life movement stands ever ready to assist both the pregnant woman and the baby she carries, the person with disabilities, and the older American struggling with illness. And that reminds me of another King quotation, "Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that." The pro-life movement is a movement powered by love and light. They offer caring, compassionate solutions to those living in the darkest of times. They shower love upon people at their most vulnerable states and provide the hope that the pro-abortion, pro-euthanasia forces do not. And that brings me to yet another King quote. "The time is always right to do what is right." 2020 is a perfect time to become even more engaged in the pro-life movement, to work even harder and smarter for those who are counting on us for their very lives. Following the footsteps of Martin Luther King Jr., we can achieve the dream that every person is cherished and valued under the law and in our hearts. In the end, history will judge us by how we treated those in the shadows of society and in the hiddenness of their mother's womb. The injustice of abortion, euthanasia, and assisted suicide will not stand, but will crumble under the weight of their own folly. God did not intend our wombs to become tombs. His words he spoke to us was for man and woman to multiply. I wonder how many more Americans would have multiplied if 61 million babies were not aborted. Our faith tells us we must live in hope. Hope is rooted in the conviction that the sovereignty, the beauty, and the glory of God remain despite all of our weaknesses and all of our failure. Hope is the grace to trust in serving Him and seeking to protect the dignity of the most vulnerable among us, that we do something wonderful and precious for the renewal of our nation and the world. No court decision, no law, no political lobby can ever change the truth about when human life begins and the sanctity that God attaches to each and every human life. The light of truth cuts through the darkness in our lives like a sword. It penetrates our hearts and separates what truth from what is false. It becomes flesh in the choices we make and the people we touch through our witness. That is our mission in the world. And with that, Madam Mayor, I would like to read the proclamation. Whereas for over 32 years, the Central Coast Citizens for Family and Life have been celebrating Respect for Life Week in Santa Maria. And whereas it is imperative that residents of the community defend life at all ages and conditions of dependency and protect the disabled, the handicapped, and those defenseless in every way. And whereas in this year's Respect for Life Week is being celebrated January 20th through January 26th, and whereas the local Life Walk took place on Sunday, January 19th, 2020, and whereas Respect for Life is a vital issue that invites full public awareness. Now therefore, Alice Patino, Mayor of the City of Santa Maria, hereby recognized the week of January 20th through the 26th, 2020 as Respect for Life Week in the City of Santa Maria and encourage full awareness of this issue. And with that, Madam Mayor, I know you were at the Sanctity of Life, and there were a lot of people there. There was at least over 200 people that attended that, and I just thought that was just a very wonderful event. And John Lindgren will be here to receive.
Wow. Councilwoman Waterfield, you just knocked it out of the park. That was incredible. You mentioned the walk last Saturday. We stood on the other side of that wall, right there, in the City Hall courtyard, to celebrate God's greatest gift to mankind, the gift of life. We were fortunate to do so because this fair city has granted us a permit for over 30 years to walk the streets of Santa Maria for the sole purpose of proclaiming that life is sacred and needs to be protected from those who would deem less than the life that matters. This is not only a declaration for the unborn, but society has deemed it necessary to target those at the other end of life as well. In both instances, the vulnerable, the weak, the innocent are in the crosshairs of a movement to devalue life because it is a burden to them. Do they have a right to choose the destiny of these valued lives? Not according to the Bible. If indeed they know and understand that God gives life and only God can end life. God gives breath and only God in his perfect timing should be the one to dictate the last breath. Yes, man has played God for far too long, and we, the pro-life community, are here to defend life to our very last breath. We are humbled to receive this proclamation from the City Council of Santa Maria. We are very thankful that our city recognizes the value of all human life. We were excited to have Mayor Patino and Councilwoman Waterfield join us last Saturday for the gathering in the courtyard. The tide is turning. Statistics indicate abortion is on a rapid decline. And America is waking up to realize that the vulnerable are under attack, and who is going to stand up for them? We the people. I want to thank you again for this great honor, and as a token of our appreciation, I'd like to, if I can find them, I'd like to give each council member a bumper sticker, if somebody could come. Basically, it says pray to end abortion on both sides, and it's just a simple reminder that not only is it important to be out there on the front lines, but it's also important to be in our prayer closet praying for the end to the scourge of abortion. We are so grateful to our God to be able to do that, to have the freedom to do that in our blessed country. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you, Mr. Lundgren. I'd like to postpone the next proclamation until the recipients are able to be here around 6:30. Thus, our next order of business is the public comment period. Madam Clerk, could you please read the agenda criteria for the public portion of the agenda?
This time is reserved to accept comments from the public on consent agenda items, closed session items, or matters not otherwise scheduled on the printed agenda. Unless otherwise directed by the mayor, speakers will have 3 minutes to comment. Direction to staff may be given. However, state law does not allow action to be taken on matters not on the agenda. Once the public comment period commences, no other speakers will be allowed to submit a request to speak form. And we have one request to speak right
One
now.
request to speak, okay. So no further requests to speak will be taken at this time, and 3 minutes. And Ms. McDonald.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, City Council, and staff. I represent the League of Women Voters. I am the director of the Observer Corps, and I'm here to observe your meeting. Have a good
You probably have 2 more minutes left, Sarah. Do you want to take it? Thank you. Thank you for being here. So that concludes the public comment portion of the agenda. And before we move on, Mr. Stillwell, anything you'd like to say? Okay. Moving on to the consent calendar, Madam Clerk, could you please read item number 3?
Routine items are presented for city council approval without discussion as a single agenda item in order to expedite the meeting. The consent calendar is approved by roll call vote with one motion, and these items are discussed only upon request of council members.
Does anyone wish to have anything pulled for discussion?
Madam Mayor, I do. I would like to have 3C pulled, please.
3C?
Uh-huh.
No one else? Okay. Could you please, Madam Clerk, could you please read 3C?
Adopt a resolution authorizing the assignment of a real property lease from the Santa Maria Valley Humane Society to the Santa Barbara Humane Society.
And this is just a technical amendment that I don't know if the rest of the council feels this way, but maybe the future amendments be made by staff instead of being brought to city council, because there's been several times that this has been done, and it's just a letter to the bank, and maybe Mr. Stillwell can elaborate on that.
Mr. Stillwell?
Or Mr.
Oh, Mr. Watson?
Mr. Watson can elaborate on that.
Whoever.
Just by way of introduction, but as, thank you, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Waterfield. So as you allude to, this is the eighth amendment to this agreement. It's a relatively short land lease agreement we have with the Humane Society. Sean Hawkins, the Director of the Humane Society, is here if you have specific questions. To reach the intent that Councilmember Waterfield mentions, I think Tom and I would suggest that adopt the resolution, amend item 4 in the resolution to add language at the end so it reads, the city manager is authorized to sign the assignment agreement and any amendments thereto.
Okay.
I make that motion.
Thank you.
Mr. Watson?
I was just going to articulate that will solve any future
Okay.
amendments while the lease is outstanding.
Okay, thank you.
So what Jason just said, can that be the motion? So I didn't get to it. So moved. So moved.
Okay. So that's for 3C?
3C, yes.
Oh, okay.
Second. Do we need to second that?
Yeah.
Second.
Okay, Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Councilmember Waterfield?
Aye.
Councilmember Cordero?
Aye.
Councilmember Moats? Aye. Councilmember Soto?
Aye.
And Mayor Patino?
Aye. Okay, so now the rest of the consent calendar.
Madam Mayor, there's no other items to be pulled. I would like to go ahead and approve the consent calendar excluding C3.
Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion to approve the consent calendar in a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Councilmember Waterfield?
Aye.
Councilmember Moats? Councilmember Cordero?
Aye.
Councilmember Soto? And Mayor Patino?
Aye. Okay, the next order of business is an appointment. Madam Clerk, could you please read the title and give the staff report?
The City Council will consider making one appointment to the Board of Appeals. Madam Mayor, members of the City Council, the request before you tonight is to make one appointment to the Board of Appeals for an unspecified term. One new application has been received from Mark Green, and Mayor Patino would make the nomination to be ratified by the City Council.
Is Mr. Green here this evening? Okay? So then I will go ahead and make the motion to appoint Mark Green to the Board of Appeals. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Mayor Patino?
Aye.
Councilmember Waterfield?
Aye.
Councilmember Cordero?
Aye.
Councilmember Moats? And Councilmember Soto?
Aye.
The next item on the agenda is a presentation. Madam Clerk, would you please read the title?
The City Council will receive a report about the outcomes of the community meetings held in 2019 to address neighborhood issues.
Okay, and Mr. Stillwell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. We just have a very short presentation here. The goal here is to close the loop and report back to the community and the city council of the community meetings that we held. It would be we would have had it on consent, but we do want to provide the opportunity for comments. The city council held town hall meetings in church in the four quadrants of the city from August 26th through December 19th. And one goal of this was to get out into the community, talk to the residents and those interested in the activities of the city, to provide them an opportunity, more than just the 3 minutes they have at a regular city council meeting, for them to come and talk to the city council and to the staff about issues of their concern. We didn't hear any complaints about the particular format. In fact, we heard a lot of good feedback from the format, where people were able to come to council meetings that are out in the community, talk to their elected officials, their elected city council, or talk to the staff that had particular ability to hear their concerns and address their concerns. Feedback we did receive was that people were happy that we were able to answer questions on the spot. And we heard a number of times that folks said it was nice to not say, we'll get back to you later, and we'll get back. Well, we do follow up, but I think we heard that people appreciated that the responses and issues were addressed at those meetings. And as the council and the other attendees would notice, the meetings were very vibrant. We had the staff set up in the tables there to be able to answer questions that the community may have about city issues. The council would mingle around, and so it was a real opportunity for people to just come and discuss their issues, discuss their concerns, raise issues or problems that they wanted the city to be able to address. We had no overarching concerns of issue. Instead, we received a wide range of questions, and most of the questions, as I mentioned, were answered on the spot. The most common questions we had were traffic enforcement, and we were fortunate there to have both code enforcement and the police department, as well as the other departments there with Public Works, to talk about how to enforce particular traffic concerns. Some of them are a code issue where we need to contact the landowner. Some of them are an enforcement issue where police can do additional traffic enforcement. And some of them we may need to put in some traffic control devices, no parking zones, put in some no parking signs. The other issues we heard were about landscaping, general parking, homelessness, and again, that related to parking and having the homeless RVs, people living in their RVs parked in neighborhoods. And we had general comments about trash or back bike paths and access to parks and things along those lines. So there wasn't any large, broad concern. There was a lot of good discussion, a lot of good issues, and we were glad to be able to get out to the community and hear those concerns. One other thing I will note is we have video archives of these meetings. And again, the format of the meeting was the mayor presenting at the beginning some overall information about the city, and then breaking out to a breakout room to discuss particular issues of concern. And both the mayor's discussion and some of the conversations going on in the meeting halls were video archived and are on the city's YouTube channel. And that concludes our report. Again, we just wanted to close the loop and explain to the viewing public that we had these 4 meetings and not leave anyone hanging wondering how the meetings went. We thought they went real well, and we heard good feedback.
Thank you. Any questions or comments, Mr. Stilwell?
I have a comment, Madam Mayor. Thank you very much. I just want to say to hopefully a lot of the listening public and the people here, we scheduled this meeting for your benefit, you people who live in Santa Maria. How many voters are there, like 60-something thousand in the public? There's the eligible voters. Does anybody know? Yeah, well, there's quite a few. There's 108,000 people in the population. I think that we should encourage people to come to these meetings and show up. It's so difficult at times. You can see the frustration. We don't have to deal with it as much, but the mayor does. You see the frustration that I only get 3 minutes. This is a major issue. I've been dealing with this thing for 15 years, and I need more than 3 minutes, and they don't have it. So I'd certainly like to encourage people to come, and many times, I know that I was answering some of the questions to say, well, here's the answer, but that information is already on our website, and you can go to that and save yourself some time and effort and read it several times if you want to in order to get your answers. So it really is worthwhile, and the more people we have go to these, the more we can learn from them, and the better we can make the meetings be for all members in the community. And that's it. It's just a very supporting feeling that I have about that kind of dialogue that we had within these meetings. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cordero. I was asked by other people, are we going to be doing these again? And I also encouraged people, though we went to the different neighborhoods and the different quadrants in the city, that they were welcome to come to any of the meetings, not just the ones closest to them, but we were just trying to get the meetings closer in the neighborhoods. But so I was asked by people, are we going to continue to have these? So, and how the feeling of the council? Yeah. So maybe we'll schedule it when it gets warmer, and then there's, the weather is better and everything, and I think maybe during daylight savings time also helps, because people are more likely to come out when it's still daylight rather than leaving.
And I think there wasn't a whole lot of people that showed up at some of the meetings. So I don't know if it was location or they just did not hear what was going on, if we were having these meetings or not. So, and, at what point do we continue to do them if there are just maybe one or two people that show up?
How did the department heads feel about this, Mr. Steelwell?
They compiled the questions, and they had said, the format, as we indicated, was a little different this time, where we actually wanted to be more engaged with the public. And so I think generally what I heard, the department directors like that ability to talk to the constituents, explain the issues, and try to solve the issues. One thing we have in staff is folks who want to solve the issues and improve the community and have a well-served government for the people that live here. So from that sense, it was nice to be able to work with the folks who are bringing concerns. They took enough time out of their lives to be able to come to the meetings and hear what we're doing and express some of their particular issues and concerns. So we appreciated the opportunity to follow up on those and talk to them about it.
Okay. Well, I guess then the consensus, I think, is that to continue. Did you have something to say, Ms. Soto?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I agree that we should continue having these, and I just really want to thank the department heads for attending. Some of the feedback that I heard was that our constituents, our residents, really enjoyed getting to meet the department heads and actually getting to know all of the different departments within the city. And so I know that they really appreciated meeting you all, and so thank you for not just sending staff, but you two being there and being present. It was really great to see that.
Okay, thank you. Oh, Dr. Moats.
Well, I was just thinking, you might want to provide some inducement for citizens of our community to come to these sessions, other than to air their grievances and ask questions. For example, some hot dogs or something like that. If you provide food, you might get a doubling of the attendance.
Okay, well, we are open to any suggestions, so can we put you in charge of the hot dogs, Dr. Moats?
Not if you want them cooked properly.
Okay, well, think we beat that one to death. Okay, thank you very much. The next regular business item, Madam Clerk, could you please read the title?
The City Council will receive the 2019 Standards of Cover written procedures that assist the fire department to ensure safe, effective response for fire suppression, emergency medical services, and specialty response situations.
Thank you. The staff report is to be given by Fire Chief Mr. Champion.
Good evening, Mayor Patino and City Council. I'm really excited to be here tonight to bring forward our latest revision to our Standards of Cover report. Basically, the original report was done back in 1998 from retired Fire Chief Frank Ortiz. There was an update 2 years later, and it's been about 19 years since we've had that next update. So before you is basically an analysis and a risk assessment of what our community faces and how our department stacks up to responding to those needs. So our department hired an emergency services consulting international firm to perform that update, and they are here tonight to give a presentation on the results of that report. But before I bring up the consultant, I want to acknowledge some city staff that was instrumental in providing some of the research for this project. First of all, I would like to recognize retired Assistant City Manager Pat Weimiller, Dawn Robbins and Michelle Heath from our GIS department, Shauna Hicksenbaugh from Dispatch, and finally Tracy Aris and Christy Tolles-Martin from the Fire Department. We couldn't have done this without their hard work in supporting all of the required information that needed to be gathered. So a big thank you to all those city staff members and to anyone else who assisted with this report. So now I would like to introduce you Kurt Ladapow with ESCI, who will give the presentation this evening on that report.
Thanks, Chief. Madam Mayor, members of council, I'd like to echo the thank you to the staff that the chief shared. We ask a lot on the front side of these reports, and it really takes a lot of our team and your team working together. I'd like to thank the council for the time you spent with us during the interviews. We believe the stakeholder piece, you'll hear a little bit more about this in a minute, is an extremely important portion. Just as you had meetings throughout the community, we tried to touch as many folks as possible during those interviews. As we move into the presentation, I'll try to move fairly quickly. I want to emphasize this is a snapshot in time, just as the report that was updated in 2000 was a snapshot in time. So what you're going to see in this report is a fair amount of information from 2018. Now, what we acknowledge is, even as we're doing the studies, things don't stand still. As a matter of fact, the department has continued to progress. Some of the recommendations are already in motion, so please kind of keep that in mind when you see some of the information. So we prepare these studies to comply with standards that are recognized nationally, as well as, in this particular case, the Commission on Fire Accreditation International. The difference between your 2000 report and this one is a fairly robust community risk analysis and a pretty deep dive into your data. In the 139 pages that I won't go over individually, you'll see this is what we cover in the entire report. It's pretty broad. There's a lot of information in there and a fair amount of analysis that goes into this. On the team that did the report, in addition to myself, we had a certified public accountant as well as the most skilled data analyst that we have in the company. It is what it is. It's a review and assessment of the community. There are, in fact, recommendations within it. So here's what it is. Here's what it's not. This is not a mandate. These are recommendations for your consideration. It's not a mandate requiring any system change that you don't want to make or any expenditure of funds. You already know about your community. However, to capture the essence of the community for the reader, we highlight that you're a growing urban community, growing past 107,000 plus, as Councilmember Cordero mentioned. And right now, you're sitting at about 23 square miles. We did hear through the interviews that there's an interest in annexation, however. You have a full-service fire department. Again, this is your snapshot as of 2018 and part of 19. 6 staff stations, 61 full-time employees, including administrative staff, and 1 part-time. The minimum daily staffing for your department is 17 that is on duty. As we were moving through this study, the chief sent us a note, and effective in April 2020, due to a very successful attempt at a grant, your full-time, your FTE count will go to 70 and 1 part-time, and a minimum of 19 folks on duty every day. And that is significant, and I'm going to show you a chart later in the presentation that shows the positive impact of that change. Here are all the services that are provided. Most of this you already know. You're what we consider and what we label an all-risk fire department. Speaking of risk, common risks, the risk section of this report is extensive. I'm not going to dive into that section because it's huge, for one thing. But your commons are your earthquakes, your hazardous materials, and this slide depicts the number of high fire flow buildings that you have throughout the city. And as you can see, they're fairly well spread out. You have, in fact, had an 8% increase over the past 10 years. Some people may say, well, those are all EMS calls, and to some degree that's a true statement. But what you'll see by this chart is your EMS calls are only about 50, and I can't see it from here, 55, 56%. That's emergency medical requests for service as well as traffic accidents. You are at 90.4 incidents per 1,000 population. You're basically in the middle of the norm. The normal range is 70 to 120 calls per that population. And as you see on this chart lays out the, and I'm having a hard time seeing my own slides. So these are your call volumes by month, and we looked at 3 years worth. So you'll see you're fairly static. It's interesting, 2017 you were peaking in some of the months, and 18 you slowed down a little bit. That's not going to continue. So this one we look at the day of the week, and you're fairly consistent. You peak on Friday, which is interesting. You would normally expect to see that a similar peak on Monday, and you try to attribute that to commuters, but you are fairly consistent. Now this chart here shows a variation in the hour. And again, even though we're doing pretty sophisticated analysis, it's not rocket science. The department is the busiest from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. And you'll see them ramp up and stay up there. You're right, it doesn't work on the screen. Okay, so there it is. Well, the next thing we did is we charted all emergencies within the city. There's no area in the city that doesn't have any calls, but the bright colors it's based on population, so you can see your city core is very, very busy. Not an unusual dynamic given that's your density. You also have a couple of pockets that are extremely busy, and when I show you the EMS calls, you'll probably recognize those facilities. These are your fires. Again, there's not one area that your fire calls are focused. You're pretty well spread out, but again, if you'll notice that core, and you've got quite a cluster right there around Station 1. So call volume, population density will drive call volume. In this particular case, here's your emergency medical request for service concentration. So you're familiar with your city, you see those hot spots, those are highly dense areas. But you also see some spots over there to the east, and those are your medical facilities, your care facilities, and there's actually a recommendation within the report relative to some discussion on those facilities. Crew workload. So again, we looked at 3 years in this particular analysis, and without a doubt, Engine 1 and Engine 5 are your two busiest stations. Probably nothing you didn't know. You hear them running up and down. I'm going to show you some other interesting charts. So we charted out your response workload forecast. Now, instead of only looking at 3 years, we looked at 9 years. We looked at 9 years of fire records management data, and we looked at population, and we're projecting that by 2050, you're going to have a very, very busy system running at about 23,000 calls a year.
We're running right up against about 10,000.
I apologize, my recall isn't as good as it should be. We're wrapping up 3 separate reports this month. So, okay, we talked about stakeholder interviews. And some of you that we did interview, Gail and I shared with you, we do believe that the stakeholder interview process is an extremely important portion of the studies that we do. For your city, we had 39 interviewees, and it represented the community at large, it represented elected officials, city administration, rank and file, etc. What I have here are some real quick slides. There's much more detail. There's much more detail in the report, but I put together a few slides about expectations and opinions. I'm not going to read them to you. Citizen and business community, these are great, great expectations, and for the most part, what we heard from them is those expectations are being met. Can we improve? Absolutely, we can always improve. But here are just a snapshot of those expectations. City Council, you shared with us some of your expectations. Some of you may recognize some of these bullets, but we also interviewed city administration. Again, these are not unusual expectations. Keep in mind that 8-minute when I get to some slides here in just a few minutes. Here are some opinions from your labor unit, your chief officers, and your rank and file. They're very proud of your organization, and rightly so. They are a very progressive department and getting more progressive as they move along. They're very proud of the work they do once they get on scene, and they commented, and you guys live this all the time, the success rate for obtaining grants is phenomenal. So now we're going to look at system performance, and system performance is fairly simple. It's people, it's tools, it's time, and it's effectiveness. Trained people, apparatus and equipment, which you have been making significant progress on updating your apparatus. Time is the duration between the start of the event, and remember, the start of the event is not when the bell goes off. The start of the event is when your constituents have a problem and they call 911. So from their perspective, that's when that event starts. The effectiveness to the degree which harm caused by the event can be limited. That may be stop loss on a fire. It may be a save from a CPR call. So this is what we measured when we get to effective response force. This is a low-rise structure fire. Some of us refer to this as bread and butter, if you will, but this is what we call a first alarm assignment. So keep in mind, and I'll remind you about this in a minute, that 16 people, 4 engines, 1 truck, 1 battalion chief. That's a first alarm assignment. It's important to remember that under the task column, those tasks are normally being performed simultaneously. There's a lot going on when all these people show up. Phases of the emergency event. There are 8 phases. We measured these. We measured the contact with the dispatch center. dispatch incident processing, crew notification, turnout time, travel time. Why do we care? So the influence of time, this is a very, very common graph for us in the fire service. And I'm sorry the pointer doesn't work, but you reach a certain time about midway there where the fire accelerates dramatically and we end up with what we call flashover. When we have flashover, normally folks in those rooms will not be able to survive. Now, these are some national statistics from 2011 and 2015. If we can get on scene, if the fire department can get on scene and confine the fire to the room of origin, the national statistics will tell you the civilian deaths are running about 1.8. Injuries, 24.8, and the average loss per fire is very, very low. Now, obviously, if the fire grows, those statistics are going to grow. If you confine it to the floor of origin, then your deaths increase. And if you confine it to the building of origin, you basically have lost it and you have significant deaths. This is the influence on time on your medical calls. And the most successful we can be, the sooner we can get there. And trauma, we talk about the golden hour. You all are very fortunate. You have a very fine medical facility here in town. And matter of fact, when I was the chief of Lompoc, all of our STEMI calls, which are heart calls, ended up coming up here. Performance goals. I'm hoping you can see this. Most everything is at 24 font, but not this. In 2000, when your SOC was updated, Chief Ortiz established these performance goals. And I'm going to refer to them over the next few slides, but you can see call processing from the time the call's received, from the time that person in distress dials 911, the dispatcher answers it, and they push the button to get the crews rolling. The performance goal was 60 seconds, 90% of the time. Turnout time, bell goes off, crews are on the station rolling out. That was another 60 second, 90% of the time. Notice that I'm saying 90%, I'm not saying an average. We measure in fractiles. So in other words, 90% of the time, we would expect the crews to hit these marks, not on average. Travel time, the chief said a 3-minute response, and I think I know why. I'll show you in a minute. And then from the time the first unit gets the call and rolls and gets on scene, 5 minutes, and then full effective response force, 9 minutes, and I'll explain that in just a minute. So here it is. Call answer time, we didn't measure. We couldn't get, we were not, the data was not provided to us. Call processing, now call processing is they're getting the information and they're notifying the station. In 2018, on EMS calls, the call processing time was right at 1.5 minutes. Okay, so now we look at the time of day that the calls are being processed and the hours. And you'll notice the time will fluctuate. So the calls being processed, the number of incidents. The call processing time is fairly consistent, but you'll see the incidents drop off at night. Turnout time. This is the amount of time it takes the crews to get rolling from the station. They get the call, they get on the unit, they go in service. The 2000 goal was 60 seconds, 90% of the time. You'll see those goals are not being met. And turnout time is always a little different during the different hours. You'll see it gets better in the middle of the day One of the reasons for that is not unusual. The crews are already on the road. Travel time, the travel time expectation that was in the 2000 report was 3 minutes. You'll see that 3 minutes is not happening, and in all honesty, in a city this size with the traffic you have, 3 minutes is a pretty tough objective. However, and this is your travel time, these are your incidents, and your travel time is fairly consistent throughout the call day, if you will. So, in an attempt to match that goal of 3-minute travel, what the analyst did is he plotted every emergency call. We only plotted emergency calls, not the code 2s, not the help I've fallen and can't get ups. We only plotted emergency calls. 96.6% of all the incidents in the city in 2018 were in fact within, by computer modeling, 3 minutes of a fire station. And that's the only explanation I can come up with for the 3-minute objective. However, this is a perfect world. It is not a perfect world. So these are your, did I hit the wrong button? So these are your actual response times, and you're not going to do 3 minutes. Received to arrival. This is the calls received to the crews arrived on scene. And again, you're not meeting the time that was set. Okay, effective response force. I apologize. I know you've got somebody you want to give a proclamation to. So, effective response force, it goes back to that first alarm I shared with you. 4 engines, 1 ladder, 1 battalion chief. The effective response force goal that was set in 2000 was 9 minutes. That's 9 minutes from the time they get the call, they get on the rig, they get to the scene. In 2016, you had 8 calls that received the effective response force, and there's the times that it did. 2017, 4, 2018. So none of the calls received an effective response force within the time that was set in the 2000 study. Okay. Effective response force with automatic aid. The dark green is where it can be achieved using an 8-minute travel time model. As you see, as it lightens up, the lightening up is less firefighters on scene. And that's a better view of it. It's pulled out all the periphery, if you will. This is the area where you can get those 16 people on scene with an effective response force. The fire department arrived at your EMS calls within 7 minutes, 28 seconds, 90% of the time. There will be a correction in your study. It was brought to our attention that the data that was provided did not have the non-priority calls filtered out of it. So yesterday, we ran another data run and filtered those out. And this is what we come up with. AMR's arrival time is 8 minutes, 10 seconds, which is still not in agreement with what was given to us by AMR in the county. We have some ideas why it doesn't match, and we're willing to take a look at any new data they wish to give us. Call concurrency. You're a fairly busy system. So these are the number of times that you had 1 call through 9 running at the same time. So as you can see, in 2018, 4,401 times you had double calls, et cetera, et cetera. These are the number of times you had calls that required more than 1 unit. And I will tell you, as you look at this chart, and you'll notice these columns are starting to increase. So as the system gets busier, you're going to have more and more times when more than one unit will be committed to the same incident. Highlights. I am not going to go through all those recommendations, I promise. But I am going to give you a few highlights very, very quickly. And this one, this I believe is important. I believe it's important that we make a recommendation that you consider adopting performance goals that are within national standards. And when you have time to look at this in the report, you'll notice that these are a little different than those 2000, the ones that were made in the year 2000. It's been proven by multiple agencies that these are attainable, but you will have to make some tweaks to your system. Travel time is definitely impacted by traffic. The fact that you have traffic preemption is a plus. However, it's our understanding that not all the traffic signals are equipped. There's some really nice stuff out there that's going on with traffic preemption. Traffic preemption, in essence, changes the lights so that the fire apparatus get a green light, everyone else gets a red light. It improves safety, not just for your firefighters, but also for the motoring public. We know that you have in the plan to implement emergency medical dispatching at the police department. This reinforces that plan, but we also recommend that you implement it sooner than later. There's a lot of benefit to doing this. I'm not going to read the slide, but it will reduce the Code 3 workload. It'll give you more efficiency in how you run your department. Now, there is a discussion within the report about paramedic level service. And there were a few things that came out during the interviews. There were comments that made that they felt the department should be providing advanced level medical support from the engine companies. There was also very telling responses in that folks believe that the unit that arrives first should be able to render the appropriate level of care, regardless of if it's the fire department or an ambulance. As an old paramedic, I subscribe to this, but I use data to reinforce it. And when you look at the percentage of EMS calls, we believe this is a rock-solid recommendation. We also believe, consistent with the county fire chiefs, that the EMS system should use all available resources to their maximum capability to provide a level of quality care across the landscape. The chief and I have talked about this. Obviously, this is a very data-intense study. We did have some hiccups along the way. We believe there could be some improvement in the data collection process. Clearly monitor the workload. As the study evolved, it came to us multiple times about the development that you're enjoying, the expansion the city is enjoying, and you don't have to drive very far to see that. It is extremely important that this be monitored, and the chief and I were just talking about this morning, or this afternoon. So unit hour utilization, what we have found is that once a unit reaches 10% or greater, their availability to respond is within their district, within their response zone, is greatly diminished. So what we do is, this recommendation is rock solid. Plan for the long-term staffing of an engine and a truck at Station 1. You're already moving in that direction, right? Well, here's the data analysis that shows the value. And if you simply take a look at the first line of Station 1, right now, without 2 units operating at Station 1, the current probability of a wait time for a customer making a call is over 20% during the day and over 10% at night. We plug in a second unit, and it dramatically reduces that potential for a wait time because you've got redundancy. So you're already getting ready to address that in April at Station 1. It's extremely important, in our opinion, in our recommendation, that you monitor what's going on, particularly at Station 5 and at Station 2. Going back to watching what the impact of development is, this is how you monitor it. As those units become more and more busy, the wait time probability is going to go up. So if you're developing in those areas, we should be watching that unit hour utilization. Fire Marshal's office, as the city grows, the demand on fire prevention grows. I know you're already have in the budget a couple of positions, and so this has already taken place. Pre-incident planning, because the department in years past has been short-staffed, call volumes increased, some of the programs have been suspended. We recommend you reinstitute pre-incident planning. That's the overview of the recommendations. I'd be more than happy to make an attempt to answer any questions you may have, or stand by if you want to move on to your resolution.
Okay, I think I'm going to put you on a standby situation here, and we're told these two organizations that we would do a time certain at 6:30. But I would like to say this has been a great report, and anytime I can read 39 pages and not fall asleep, that's really something for me. I thought it was very good, very concise, and right to the point. So thank you very much. And then there will be questions afterwards. Thank you. So here we are. So it looks like we've got all the Elks members and Rotary members here now. So I'm going to start with you, Mr. Cordero.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
And Mr. Cordero and Ms. Waterfield are both Elks members. You're an Elk member, I'm an Elk member. But I thought if you two would like to do the presentation for the Elks.
Sure.
Okay.
Before I read the proclamation, I just want to point out that that the Elks seems to be a place where some of our city employees end up getting put out to pasture. They go to the Elks. There's a number of us that are Elk members that are retired city employees. So, and some really old ones like Doug. So here we go. Whereas the Santa Maria Elks 1538 has been an active contributor to improving community spirit in the city of Santa Maria for many, many years. And whereas since 1992, members of the Elks Lodge have volunteered during Christmas season to purchase and install scores of holiday decorations on the city's major thoroughfare. And whereas the Elks festive Christmas trees, holiday bells adorn city street lights, poles, reminding the residents and visitors that the holiday season is upon us, and encouraging the Christmas spirit to be spread throughout the community. And whereas it has been the volunteer effort of a small group of Elks members who are not only who not only hang these Christmas decorations, but also hang the Elks rodeo banners during the rodeo season. And whereas these volunteers' efforts are supported by local business, and whereas the decorations remind and call upon the Santa Maria residents and visitors to participate in the community events that make the city a great place to live and visit. Now, therefore, Alice Patino, Mayor of the City of Santa Maria, recognizes the following for their dedication in providing the service to the residents of the City of Santa Maria, and thank them for their volunteerism. The Elks 1538 members are Keith Barks, Tom Foster, Dennis Sapansky, Doug Shear, John Silva, Frankie Guzman, Trinidad Ramos, England Gray Incorporated, and Recreation and Parks employee Javier Valencia. In witness whereof, Mayor Patino has caused the seal of the great city of Santa Maria to be affixed hereto on this 21st day of January 2020. Signed, Alice Patino, Mayor. Alice Patino, Mayor. Oh, I missed one. Quinn Rentals. Where's Quinn at? Oh,
Hey,
okay.
thank you.
Let's all meet down here by the microphone, and we'll let Anna do the hugging, and I'll just give her the things. You're all great guys, and I love you, but we gotta stay a little way.
Okay, so all you ELK members, if you please come down here.
Fudge. Pretty cool. Who else is there? Oh, there's Bob right there.
If there's more of these that are needed, we can supply you some additional
Okay.
copies.
Sure. I'd like to read a few names of some people that started this. Bob knows a lot about this and when it started. Can you give him a little history on when it started?
I would like to just quickly mention, it officially started in 1984.
And you are who?
I'm Bob Engel with Engel and Gray.
Thank you, Ms. Provenia, Ms. Engel.
But I was on the chair of the Valley Merchants Committee, and we started to think of this idea, and we approached the Elks, and Butch Seamus agreed to help us put these up with Clarence Minetti, and how they got the first crew to ever start working was Clarence fed them at the Far Western out in Guadalupe after every time we got done doing them, because these guys, these guys worked their tail off. They worked their tail off getting up that early in the morning, beating the traffic, and it's been quite a success. And it's really funny, the salesman that sold us the decorations, 1984, said they would last maybe 5 years. These guys have taken such good care of them, and they store them and they stack them in a storage container at our yard. And how many years now? That's amazing.
Thank you, Bob.
Excuse me, hold on just a second. Mr. Martinez? I didn't realize, this first one I've had that's 2 pages long, so would you come up here with the group as well?
No, it's not. No, it's not. No, it's not. Trust me.
This is another one?
Yeah.
Just another? Okay.
Okay.
That's twice. So
Go ahead.
Read a few names
so
of,
stay there.
Sure.
I'm going to read a few names of some of the guys that used to help out.
Go ahead.
Larry Tanner. Where'd he go? Larry Tanner, Jim Erickson, Norm McDonald, Al Noble, Billy Hadsel, Dick Melman, Paul Lopez, Phil Smith, Jim Brunson, Bob Savings, Tom Sartain, Jaws, which is Clyde Stalls, Pinky Signorelli, Robert Amzetti, Matt Clark, Barry Stewart, Jerry Martin, Bill Ashbrook, Pete Paradis, Bobby Randolph, which was there and worked for Bob Engel. He was the operator, and which he did a really good job, and Doug's our operator now. And some past guys that used to help out, Will Collier, Scott Stevens, and Bruce the Animal. And there's a few other guys that I probably forgot, so it's been a fun ride. We're still doing it. The hardest part is just getting up in the morning. It's the safest time to do it at 4 o'clock in the morning. And we still have a good time doing it, and it's for the community and for the Elks Lodge and the city, of course. So we want to thank you for presenting this to the Elks Lodge and
Well, you
us.
know, the Elks do so many great things for the city, and this is just one of them that we're able to highlight and we're able to see. But thank you so much, gentlemen. Thank you
Yes, ma'am.
so much.
Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Moats.
And Rotary does so many great things for the city, too. And the mayor and I are both Rotarians. And the mayor's a lunch person, the Rotary Club.
The Rotary Club of Santa Maria.
But we all know that breakfast is best. I'd like to acknowledge some of the Rotarians. We have 7 people from my club here. We've got Frank and Kevin and Tim and Jim, and we have Dave and Abby Mike. Gentlemen, I'd like to read this proclamation. Whereas the first Santa Maria Christmas Parade of Lights was executed under Rotarian leadership over 24 years ago, and whereas 4 local Rotary clubs, and there are other members from other Rotary clubs here, Tomas, namely the Rotary Club of Santa Maria, the Rotary Club of Santa Maria Breakfast, the Rotary Club of Santa Maria South, and the Rotary Club of Nipomo, and whereas the City of Santa Maria staff is extremely grateful for the approximate 2,500 participants, almost 250 community volunteers, local city and law enforcement personnel, as well as over 100 Rotarians who have helped make the Christmas Parade of Lights a truly signature community event for the Santa Maria Valley. And whereas it is through community events like this that local service clubs, businesses, and residents are able to come together, put aside their differences, and work side by side towards a common goal for the enjoyment of the entire Santa Maria community. Now, therefore, Alice Patino, member of the Rotary Club and mayor of the City of Santa Maria, hereby recognizes the following for their dedication in providing this service to the residents of the City of Santa Maria, and to thank them for their volunteerism. And they would be Mike Gibson, Judy Henberry, Tom Martinez, and Dave Wright. Thank you very much. I just wanted to note my major contribution to the Parade of Lights was enjoying the festivities at the after-parade party.
Well, it's really neat when you're riding the parade, and we all do that, but you can see the look on all the faces of these little kids, and they just love it. And so I thank all of you Rotarians for what you do every year, because this is great. And I do enjoy the festivities afterwards. Would all the Rotarians please come down here? Come on.
She's out of state. Yeah. We might have to squeeze in, huh?
Step in.
Can I just say something real quick? I know I speak for Dave and Tom and Judy, who couldn't be here. We do appreciate you saying thank you to us and all of our crew here. But what you need to also know is that we work so closely with Rec and Parks, Scott Christian, Rick Garcia. They just do a phenomenal job. And then also the police department, Mike McGehee and Dave Brewer, excuse me. They keep us safe out there, and not only do they get all their guys out there, but They have officers from Aurora Grande, San Luis Obispo, Pismo Beach, Guadalupe, and we need them all there. We really do. And the fire department, they get Santa up on the fire truck at the end. All the trash cans that are put out, the street sweepers. I mean, it truly is a big partnership with all of us as well as all of your folks. And we honestly could not do it without them. And it's a neat thing. 25 years of putting that parade on is pretty cool. So anyway, thank all of you too. So.
And thank you to Rotary for what you do all year long to help out our community and especially the youth in our community. So thank you. Yes, Dr.
I
Bose.
just wanted to say one thing about a really important role that occurred with the parade this year. And as you recall, we had inclement weather. It was questionable whether or not the parade would go off. One of our newer members, the new rector at St. Peter's Episcopal Church, was assigned the task of praying for good weather. He got good weather and got great things from Rotary after the parade.
Thank you, Dr. Moats. Thank you, guys. Okay, Kurt, you're back here. Okay, so any questions now? Yes, Ms. Waterfield.
I have a question, and I don't know if it pertains to you or the fire chief, because this didn't happen while you were doing this whole study, but since we are going to have an airport that has airline service coming to it, how is that going to affect the fire department with their workload? Or is there going to be any changes, or what are we doing there?
Thank you, Councilmember Waterfield. That is something that we are currently looking at right now and having discussions with FAA and the airport to determine whether or not if there's a change in the index. And there's a lot that goes into changing an index at an airport. And so we're looking at frequency of flights, the size of the aircraft, a number of other factors. And then when and if we do change index, that we'll be in conversations with the airport to figure out how we're going to meet the staffing needs, if any.
So that index would include if you have to have more than one or two crews out there at different times?
Correct. I believe the next trigger would be that you need to have the available 2 ARF rigs, aircraft firefighting rigs, that are meet certain criteria and capacity. Along with that comes staffing. So that wasn't ID'd in the report because that wasn't
Right,
a
no,
point of
I
discussion
get
at
that,
the time.
no. Yeah, is there going to be special training in regards to that?
No more training than what we already provide our personnel, and that's an annual requirement that we meet. And we work with the airport on making sure that our staff and personnel are up to date on their training.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions?
I do,
Yes.
Madam Mayor.
Ms. Soto?
Mine goes to the discrepancy that was in the report that you submitted and what we received from, I believe it was AMR and the county. Can you elaborate a little bit more on why there's a discrepancy in the response time?
Sure. So the data that was submitted relative to AMR, first of all, understand that AMR's records don't align with the fire department records management system. They use different incident report numbers, they have a different dispatch center, so we can't compare apples to apples. But what we did ask for were spreadsheets on their dispatch information. So the time they got the call, the time the unit went in service, the time the unit went on scene. So different than the data that we received from the fire department, the data we received from AMR did not have the filters that the fire department did. We only measure priority calls, code 3 calls. The initial data we reviewed, the analysts reviewed from AMR, had everything. Facility to facility, code 2s, etc. So when it was brought to our attention yesterday morning, somewhere around there. Yeah, just as we were getting in the car to drive down here yesterday morning, we got the email. So our analyst jumped on it right away and took a look at what was submitted, filtered out all the non-priority calls. And that's the time that I published up there, 8 minutes, 10 seconds. We still do not agree with their data. Now, I will tell you what has been determined preliminarily from our data analysis is it appears in some instances that AMR will dispatch, say, unit number 1. And somewhere in the call process that gets changed to a different unit for whatever reason. And it appears from the data that we received that the clock gets reset. So we're not in agreement with with the time that AMR quoted us that they're doing, and we believe they're measuring it the same way we are, but we're not positive, and that's some of the discussion the chief and I had, because we measured the 90th percentile. I believe they do, but I don't recall. It's just been too many years since I was down here. We're willing to look at the data again, and I've shared with the chief that I will correct the master with our data, or if they provide us with additional information to review and it aligns with the times that they're giving us, then we'll put that in the report. But right now, we only put in the report what we can prove.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a follow-up question, and I believe this would be most appropriate for the Chief Champion. Given what we heard tonight, what we read, and the recommendation of having our fire units be also emergency or first, what would
Paramedics?
Paramedics. How would that change the cost for trainings? How would that mean additional staff that we would need? Would that mean additional equipment on our units? And if so, are our fire units capable of handling that additional equipment?
Sure.
Does it fit?
Yeah. So it was identified a number of years ago that we should always evaluate and look at the possibility of going to a more of an advanced life support department. The timing of it just has to be right. We have to make sure that that everything has been looked at from what our current workforce is, what it would take to provide that kind of training. If there is opportunities to bring on additional members that already have that training that would cut down on cost, it's something that we've always considered. But at this point, we're looking at all recommendations and what is going on industry-wide as that possibility. And when and if we decide to do that, it's certainly something that we will be prepared to take on and meet the challenge.
Any other questions from the council? No? Oh.
Just a question,
Mr.
maybe a
Cordero.
comment. That transition would certainly, statistically, as we know it, the system to be working today, would certainly enhance the public safety, public welfare, with the the fire personnel being there. It's just moments in some cases before an ambulance gets there.
That's correct. The only way that we would take this on if there was a improvement to public safety and the service that we provide. So that would need to be evaluated, and if it's determined that we could provide that service in a more efficient way, then we would certainly take a look at it.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Ms.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a question regarding our wireless carriers here, and I don't know, and maybe I skipped it, or I missed it, maybe I missed it in the report, but I don't know if this report took into account that there are times when when wireless carriers cut their fiber lines for maintenance, and therefore sometimes 911 calls don't go through. And so I don't know if that was something that was taken into consideration when we put together this needs assessment or this assessment.
If that happened, it would be an anomaly that would get filtered out. We did not do an analysis of the dispatch center, only of the call processing time for fire. We didn't do an analysis of how long it takes them to answer the phone, because the information wasn't available. However, if there were to be several outliers in the data, then that would have caused us to do what we're doing right now with the AMR data, dig deeper.
Right. Yeah, I was just wondering, and I think it'd be good for us to see how we can get more information as to how we can ensure that we can notify the public when something like that happens. And I know a lot of it is really state regulations. I know that wireless carriers only need to let the public know, the public safety answering point, I believe it's called. They're mandated to let them know only if X number of residents are impacted, but one is one too many. And so I'm really curious to hear, I'm just really curious to hear how we would be able to solve that gap. And maybe this is for future conversation.
Yeah, Councilmember Soto, it is something that is on our radar, and it is a lot bigger than us. It is at the state level, and we're going to have to work with our legislators to ensure that when there is a failure in the system, that there is another way and a mechanism to notify the local answering points, the police stations, the dispatch centers, so that we can in turn notify the public, let them know that there is an alternative phone number to call, and so that when they dial 911, there's actually, if there's a disconnect, that there's another alternative to that. But that's going to be something that is going to require further legislation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I just have
Go ahead.
one more
Go ahead.
question. Switching gears to trainings, I know that in the assessment you talked about like risk, and we don't live in a community where we are threatened by wildfire, not Santa Maria wildfires, or we, knock on wood, rarely have earthquakes. But I know that we often do send our fire members out to Northern California or down south to assist in getting rid of these fires when they do occur. And so I'm just really curious as to what kind of, do our firefighters receive, I mean, I'm sure they do, but I'm just curious as to what kind of additional training they receive for that, given that that is not something that they are here on a day-to-day basis having to deal with.
Sure. Councilmember Soto, yes, we make sure and ensure that we are meeting the mandated training required for wildland firefighting. And so there are certifications that are required for us to go out and participate in the mutual aid system. And there's mandated minimum trainings that we have to do annually. So we make sure that our personnel are equipped and trained and ready to assist our neighboring communities in California. And at the same time, ensuring that we have a response force back here at home to cover our own emergencies. So that's a balance.
Thank you, Chief.
Sure.
Thank you. Dr. White, did you have something?
Well, I just had a thought and an observation. If there's a medical emergency, first the fire department arrives, and then 40 seconds later, AMR arrives. And so you've got all these people. And I think there's a perception that there's a duplication of effort, a costly duplication of effort that might be simplified and be less expensive if there were just one provider of that service.
Sure. Councilmember Moats, thank you for your question. We do get that a lot. Sometimes we arrive first, sometimes AMR arrives first. It really depends on what units are available and their location to the call. This is where what Chief Ladapow was talking about earlier in regards to EMD, emergency medical dispatching. And that is an evaluation of what level of response is needed for this emergency. Is it a lower level response that's needed versus lights and sirens, right? That's what puts people at risk, our firefighters and the community, for going to a call that is a sprained ankle. And unfortunately, that's what we have today. A better evaluation would be, let's send a unit, 1 unit or 2 units, code 2, to attend to that ankle, versus somebody who's in cardiac arrest, where you need multiple people there to attend to that patient. Minimum of 5 to 6 people is what is needed to provide that adequate care. So it really depends on an evaluation of the call and emergency, sending the right resources to that emergency. That is typically what we try to educate people on, because we do get that question quite a bit. Does that answer your question?
Of course, Chief Champion.
Okay.
I would think that in your analysis of doing something like this, you would always also look at the liability against the city should someone get treated wrong in regards to an injury that would cause death or something else like that. So there's a lot of thought that will need to go into this. And then if the Santa Maria firefighters arrive first and do treatment, and then treatment is handed off to somebody else, and that's wrong, I'm sure there's a whole lot of consideration that will go into this if and when you decide this is something that you want to do.
Councilmember Waterfield, so regarding paramedic service, is that what your question is referring to? Sure. Right now, we work very well with our partners. We transition and complement one another very well on scene. And if we were to transition to something else, if we were going to provide that ALS care, then all of those things would have to be figured out in how we interact, and that process would be clearly identified.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. One other question, and this could be something that possibly Mr. Springer can also help us answer, regarding the no service level agreement with our utilities department, our firefighter department and our utilities department. There was something alluded to that in the report, and so I was wondering if you can speak a little bit more to that, and if there's what conversations we are currently having amongst both departments to ensure that our fire hydrants are getting adequately ready, I guess, for our maintenance. Thank you, for our firefighters when they arrive.
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Soto. We have been working with the Utilities Department and Director Springer on that issue, and we are addressing how we're moving forward between our two departments on addressing our fire hydrant maintenance, our tracking system that can evaluate hydrants that need to be replaced, maintenance in general. When our firefighters go out and test a hydrant or flow hydrant, that gets captured in a platform and a database that the utilities department can see, that we can see, and then we have a system that is more robust in knowing what the health is of our hydrant system in the city. So it is something that we're engaged in conversations and trying to make improvements on.
The question I wanted to ask is, and what I read in here is that we don't have the wildfires here, but in Santa Maria we could have an earthquake or a flood. So, what percentage of our firefighters live out of the area? And are they? I guess I'm sure you have a plan, and I know our department heads are very informed of this, and we're just sort of told to stay out of the way so that you guys can get your job done. But, I guess I wonder, how else are we educating other people and other parts of the public that can take, like maybe they'd have to go to a school, like maybe to Hancock or one of the regular schools in a certain neighborhood for emergency type of things. Anyway.
Sure. So our hazard mitigation plan looks at all hazards that we're potentially exposed to and how we're going to mitigate those hazards. One is to educate our public, making sure that they know what to do during an emergency. We try to do that through outreach. Our emergency services specialist provides ongoing classes and courses in that in that effort to educate. That's through our LESTOS program and through our CERT, Community Emergency Response Team. They're great classes to participate in. They're a lot of fun. You learn a lot about what you can do for your own family, what you can do for your neighbors and the community. So not just during an earthquake, but in any incident. So those are some of the outreach efforts that we're doing. As far as firefighters and the percent that live within our city, we're probably around 20 to 25% of our firefighters live in the city. About 20%. And so it becomes, if there's an event here, it's if they can get back to work, if they're able to get on the roads and come back safely to work, then that's what they're going to do. If they are unable to get to work, what they are asked to do is to help and assist in their own community. And so we have firefighters that live here in Santa Maria that work down in LA. And so they would do the same thing for us. It's kind of this give and take. If you're not able to get to your station, to your department, to your community, then you help out where you live. And so that goes across the board in the fire service in general. And I don't know if you want to add anything, Kurt, to that.
No, you pretty much nailed it, and I do want to sing the praises of your CERT and LESTOS programs, because we looked at those long before I became a consultant. We adopted the LESTOS program in Lompoc and actually leaned on Roy to give us a help getting it going. So your outreach is a model, and I've actually bragged about this model all the way up to Northern California.
Well, I know the LESTOS program, and I've been to several of the meetings. It's just great. So I wonder, we have a lot of those are the little small fires that maybe they're in a bedroom or in a garage or something. Are we finding that they're maybe in garage conversions a lot? Or are they heaters? Are they hot plates? Or what are these fires that we're having?
Sure. So we have seen it can fluctuate as far as the amount of fires that we have in a given year. There is no trend. There isn't anything that we can point to say that is the issue that we need to fix or correct. Typically, and Kurt, you might chime in here, is that the majority of your fires are small fires that start in the kitchen. And so kitchen fires are typically a cause of small fires that lead to larger fires if they go undetected, people leaving food on the stove, unattended candles, or things that have been a problem and haven't been addressed. That's typically what we have experienced.
And that the national trend or the national statistics will tell you the number one point of origin for most structure fires in a home, residential unit, is the kitchen, which is why we spend so much time when we do our outreach talking about kitchen safety, et cetera. And then, because fires, when we do the data analysis, there's a code for the fire. It doesn't really tell us what it was or what the cause was. I did note, or when we did the analysis, we did note your arson rate is below the average. That's really good. But most of the activity that we run into, even with fires, it's a result of people. It's either, and you mentioned it, food on the stove. We've been on those calls over and over again where somebody starts cooking and leaves just to run an errand and forgets it's there. That's very, very common.
Ms. Waterfield, thank you.
I had a thought in regards to the disasters that you know, what to do in the event of a disaster. A lot of, I would say the majority of the people living in the city do not know what to do. And with our community meetings, if we could focus on something in regards just to that, to advise them of what to do in case of a flooding, in case of emergency, what roads, the whole thing, I think that would be so helpful to the community to give them information in regards to, you know, what they should do. Because I get so many people asking me in regards, do we have an emergency plan for the city of Santa Maria? And I think that's something that we really need to shout from the rooftops, as we need to inform our constituents.
Completely agree.
Yeah.
It's one of the things that we do when we're out in the community attending events. For example, Downtown Fridays is a perfect example. Our firefighters are out there, the LISTOS and CERT folks are out there with the material, educating people, explaining to them what they need to do to be prepared. So we're looking for every opportunity that we can to educate and to make sure that we're ready.
Yeah, so I think maybe a couple of meetings this year, we can focus just on that and do it. And we've been doing it in the churches. The churches seat a lot of people, so we can go in there and pretty much get a pretty good crowd, because I would think this would be an interest to everybody.
Absolutely.
So if we could plan on something like that, Madam
So
Mayor.
have disaster meetings.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that would be, I think it'd be a great idea. Yeah. Mhm. Yes, and then Dr. Moats can cook the hot dogs. Did you have a comment?
I would suggest
Yes.
twice
Mr.
it.
Cordero?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to comment, just a little addition to the LISTOS program. I've attended several of those graduations, and one of the things that I think we should all brag about is once these people are trained, typically many of them don't speak English. So if they leave here and they move to Salinas or they move to Canada or some other country, they take that training with them, and so they get to keep it. It's not something they say, well, it only works in Santa Maria. It's pretty consistent if you're dealing with a fire or a flood or an earthquake. It applies no matter where you are in the world. So I think that the local fire department goes a long way in trying to educate people that may find themselves in need. And the other thing I'd like to comment on, Chief, is the consistent effort that you make toward reaching down and finding perhaps what somebody might look at as just a small sliver of information. And the more you guys at the fire department seem to peel that back and find that, hey, this is something that we really ought to work on. And I personally, as a council person, certainly appreciate the fact that effort is always going on, and that there's a consistent strive to enhance the overall safety, and not only by the fire department, but by the police department, our first responders. You hear us comment about it a lot, but the contribution you make to the community regarding these emergency services is immeasurable. And thank you very much for that and your entire staff.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I really enjoyed reading this report. I thought it was very good. I thought the information in there is very valuable. Now, where do we go from here? Are you going to prioritize things? And part of that probably will come into budget, but I think a lot of the recommendations are really, really good. Some of them aren't going to cost very much or anything. I'm so glad that we'll be getting a couple of fire marshals, and I know Chun's going to be happy about this. So where do we go from here?
So I believe we're already working on a lot of those recommendations, and that is on part because of your support, because of the support of the community with Measure U, because of the grants that we were able to get. So moving forward is just to identify what is the first thing that we can tackle and address and implement as soon as possible, and just work down it. And then as we move forward, we're hoping to update this report every 5 years, but along the way, we would like to do attachments or addendums that would show progression, that a year from now we can see progress, and that is our hope.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Ms. Waterfield?
No, if there's no further discussion.
Do we have any written correspondence or requests to speak?
We do, Madam Mayor. Staff received one letter from Emergency Medical Services with Santa Barbara County Public Health, and I've been asked to read the letter. The EMS agency was made aware of the Santa Maria Fire Department's Standards of Cover report on January 17th, 2019 by a member of the community. The EMS agency has a concern with an inaccurate data element listed on page 98 of the document, which is then referenced throughout the report. The data report suggested that American Medical Response arrives on scene of an emergency medical incident within 10 minutes and 32 seconds, 90% of the time. This statement is not accurate. The EMS agency director is the contract manager of the AMR agreement, as well as the chair of the Contract Compliance Committee. Response times for all providers, including AMR, are routinely reviewed by all members of the committee and voted on for acceptance. For calendar year 2018, the committee approved response times for AMR as arriving on scene within 7 minutes and 59 seconds or less in the Santa Maria area 92.57% of the time. On July 25, 2019, Santa Maria Fire Department requested EMS dispatch data for calendar year 2018. This data was supplied on August 6, 2019. It appears the incorrect data was a result of not filtering out non-emergency responses, ambulance-only responses, and inter-facility transports. The EMS agency routinely reviews a variety of operational and clinical data sets. The operation data sets include reviews of response times, on-scene times, and patient care transfer times. The clinical data sets include patient disposition reviews, clinical care reviews, and protocol compliance. Please let us know if we can assist in providing additional EMS system data or analysis for your review.
Thank you. Do we have any requests to speak?
And we have one request to speak.
Okay. Nick Clay. Good evening, Mr. Clay.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council, Mr. Stillwell. Thank you very much for your time today. I just wanted to, my name is Nick Clay. I'm the director of the Santa Barbara County Emergency Medical Services Agency. I'd first like to start by commending the city and the fire service for updating the Standards of Cover report. And I also wanted to highlight that as a county, our EMS agency is responsible for the broad oversight of the system, from everything from the dispatch side to the protocols we follow and a variety of different elements. I wanted to highlight that the cardiac arrest survival rate in this county is one of the highest in the country, and it really is a testament to not only Santa Maria's efforts here, but AMR, Santa Barbara County Fire, and all the different various fire departments that provide our pre-hospital care. As mentioned in the letter, we just do have a discrepancy with regards to the AMR's response time compliance. We are simply advocating as a regulating agency that the matter of record be corrected. Just as we sit there and we run the compliance committee, as a contract manager, we have pretty clear insight into how that response time is managed and overseen. So hence our request to put that into the public record, and certainly here for any other data analysis you guys may have. I would like to commend and thank Chief Champion and Mr. Latapau for the opportunity to collaborate and get to some sort of agreement with regards to these response times. So again, thank you for your time, and we appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Any other comments from the council? Okay, hearing none.
If not, Madam Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to adopt a resolution confirming the receipt of the 2019 Community Risk Assessment Standards of the Cover Study.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Councilmember Waterfield?
Aye.
Councilmember Cordero?
Aye.
Councilmember Moats?
Aye.
Councilmember Soto?
Aye.
And Mayor Patino?
Aye. Next item will be the report by City Manager, Mr. Stillwell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the City Council. Based on the action of the council tonight, the February 4th meeting is canceled due to a lack of items. So the next meeting of the City Council will be February 18th. At that meeting, we will have, we'll start off with a retirement resolution for retiring Battalion Chief from the Fire Department, Thomas Crakes. We also on that meeting have an appointment of a Community Blocks Grant Advisory Committee member, the Measure A 5-year local program of projects, which are our transportation projects, and the second quarter budget report. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Mr. Cordero, would you like to start with
Thank you,
oral
Madam Mayor.
reports?
On the January the 8th, I had the esteemed pleasure of working with Ben Hayes. I've done this before under Mayor Lavanino, and Ben's always a great guy to work with. And what I do there is what Dr. Moats did last year and routinely in the past, all the Mayor Pro Tems have done, is we just give him a recap of what went on at the meeting the night before. I'll do this same thing for tonight's meeting tomorrow morning. On the 10th, I attended the secret meeting out at the airport to reveal the three destination points that will be done by United United Airlines out of the Santa Maria Airport, and I'm certainly glad to see that we have secured 3 flights, and pretty much those 3 flights should plug most people into anywhere in the world they might want to go to some of the other airports. On the 14th, I attended the groundbreaking ceremony for Honda, which was exciting. It's exciting to see that Enos Ranch start to build up even more. On the 16th, I was at the economic update that was put on by the UCSB, and it was kind of humorous. He said everything's going fine, the economy's fine, the stock market's crazy, the meeting's over. And then he reiterated that he wanted to talk about just the business side, not whether you want cannabis or not, but it was pretty much centered around the business side of the cannabis industry elsewhere in the county, that since we don't have anything here. On the 18th, I know you're going to mention this a little bit, Mayor, but I attended the service for Sten at Dudley Hoffman. And then I just want to mention, and I know that Ms. Waterfield mentioned earlier through her delivery of the resolution, the holiday yesterday with regard to a great American citizen, that being Martin Luther King Jr., and his many contributions to not only this nation, but elsewhere in the world. And that's it for me, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Dr. Boats.
Madam Mayor, on the 10th, I also attended the announcement of the new air service we had at the airport. Everybody knows it's San Francisco, LA, and Denver. 1 flight a day. On the 16th, I also went to the Santa Barbara UCSB Economic Forecast and learned a little bit about cannabis. And that's the end of my report.
Thank you. Ms. Waterfield.
Madam Mayor, on Wednesday, January 8th, I attended with a lot of great pastors here at City Hall, right here in the little foyer, Pastors Network Prayer over the city. On Thursday, January 9th, I attended the LAFCO board meeting. Friday the 10th, I also attended the airport announcement with United Airlines. On Tuesday, January 14th, I attended the groundbreaking ceremony for the new Honda dealership that will be coming in. And Saturday, January 8th, I attended Jerry Sten's funeral, who, it was amazing to see how many people in that funeral was wearing his jewelry, because he was a fantastic jeweler and had been in Santa Maria for many years. And he was just an incredible man that just produced wonderful, wonderful jewelry. And that was it.
Thank you. Ms. Soto.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. On Thursday, January 9th, I attended the downtown committee meeting with Ms. Waterfield and other members of the committee to discuss downtown. I too attended the airport announcement of the new flights on Friday, January 10th. Sorry, I'm looking through my calendar. And then on January 16th, I attended the UCSB Economic Forecast Project, which, as you all heard, they discussed cannabis, the cannabis industry. And on Saturday, January 18th, I attended the Santa Maria Valley's second annual Women's March, where I had the opportunity to speak on the ERA, the right to vote, and women's rights in protecting reproductive health care, including abortion care. And that was pretty much it.
Thank you. On the 9th, I attended the Monterey Bay Community Power Launch in San Luis Obispo with Mayor Harmon. On the 10th, I want to thank all of you for being there for the airport announcement, because that's really important that they know that we're all supportive. And January 14th, I attended the groundbreaking ceremony of Honda at Santa Maria, and that day was super cold, so that was the one day of the week that was super, super cold. January 16th, I was in Santa Barbara at the SBCAG monthly board meeting, and then the APCD board meeting, Board of Directors meeting. On the 18th, I spoke at the Women's March at Menami Park, and then went over to funeral of Jerry Stinn. And on the 19th, did the Walk for Life and attended the memorial for Fred Sanders. This morning, I spoke on the Ben Hayes radio show, and that's it. I would like to make a comment about these two men that were, we have such a great community. And again, both of these men, Fred Sanders and Jerry Stinn, were both Rotarians and contributed a lot to the city of Santa Maria. Jerry was an artist, and I think his wife mentioned today he was sort of messy, and I thought he was an artist. That was not his focus to, tidy things up. And also very involved in our community. Any fundraiser that we always went to, there was Stinn jewelry there. I think sometimes he gave away more jewelry than he sold. And such a giving man and gave to the community. And also Fred Sanders, who belonged to, besides Rotary, he belonged to PCPA, Santa Maria Valley Humane Society, and the Santa Maria Philharmonic. And both of these men gave a lot, really contributed a lot to the city of Santa Maria. Mr. Cordero?
I'd just like to add to Jerry Stinn, for the listening public and anybody here, if you don't know it, Jerry Stinn has a piece of art on display at the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. That a picture of that display was at his service, and it seems to have a bit of a Indian connotation to it, as far as I'm concerned. But nonetheless, a very beautiful piece of art. If you ever find yourself in Washington, D.C., I know that if I do again, I'll certainly be looking for that piece of artwork. That's all.
I think he also had some jewelry on sale at the Smithsonian, and I'm not sure which. I'll have to ask his wife.
Yeah.
But there were stories about people ran into people that looked at their jewelry and knew where it was, who made it, who the artisan was. So I thought that was very interesting and very telling. And yesterday was celebration of Martin Luther King, and lest we forget the contribution he made to our great country. Any other comments from the dais? If not, this meeting is adjourned.